A journey that started in Britain and ended in torture.
Who do you think ordered your arrest? It was the British authorities that ordered the arrest. I was dumbfounded.
A mysterious plane picking up victims to be tortured, which visits an RAF base in Oxfordshire.
It's really quite active in the UK. It uses some of the military and former military facilities in the UK, Brize Norton, for example, and Mildenhall.
A British ambassador warning his superiors against torture, and now unemployed.
I can honestly say that it didn't occur to me that opposition to torture could get you sacked in the United Kingdom.
Tonight, we travel through the United States' worldwide network of torture. In this secret world, there are no courts, no lawyers, no rights of appeal.
I started crying and I said, how come you're doing this? I knew by then they were sending me to be tortured.
And we show how Tony Blair's Britain, contrary to all its expressed principles, has been dragged into it. Wahab al-Rawi's family fled torture under Saddam to settle in Britain. Wahab took British citizenship, started a business, and always thought he was safe here. In November 2002, Wahab drove to City Airport. He was flying to the Gambia to set up a business. But as he boarded the plane, he was pulled aside.
This is the first time I was ever in contact with the intelligence service, where they asked me a few questions, very routine stuff about where am I going, what am I doing, who's with me. And they seemed to be very satisfied, and they said, you go ahead and good luck to you.
Wahab flew off to the Gambia. Wahab's younger brother, Bishr, has lived in Britain for 20 years as well. Unlike Wahab, he chose to keep his Iraqi citizenship.
He was proud of being an Iraqi. If an American or a French person comes and lives in the UK, they can live here normally without changing their citizenship.
A few days later, Bishr too set off for the Gambia to join his brother. But as he and his business partner, Jamil al-Banna, went aboard their flight, they were arrested.
We met in Paddington Green Police Station, and they had been hauled off the plane on a pretext that was utterly bogus, questioned about an electronic device which was a basic battery charger from Argos.
They were held for 4 days, then released. Jamil asked the police if it was okay to continue their journey.
They knew he was going to the Gambia. He asked if there was a problem, and they said no.
Bishr and Jamil finally caught their flight. Wahab said he'd meet them at the airport when they arrived.
I was looking forward to meeting them. I mean, they had come all the way, and they're my partners, my brother.
But as they touched down, someone else was waiting. The local secret police.
Upon the arrival in Banjul airport, we were all at that point arrested. My brother, my two partners, Mr. Al-Banna and Mr. Janoudi, myself, my contact in the Gambia, my driver.
The men were taken to National Security Headquarters, but it wasn't the Gambians who wanted them.
2 hours later, the Americans arrived. They were very threatening from the start. He introduced himself as Mr. Lee. He said, look, you know, we're from the American embassy, and we were working with the Gambians to try to clear up the situation. Could you please cooperate? I said, look, you have no authority over me. I need to see my High Commissioner and a lawyer.
Wahab was ignored. Instead, the Americans wanted to know about the brothers' friendship with this man, Abu Qatada. He's held in Belmarsh prison, suspected of being a key figure in Al-Qaeda.
I kept saying, well, I've known Abu Qatada when he wasn't supposed to be a terrorist. He wasn't declared a terrorist by anybody. I'm not going to change my friendship to somebody just because you guys changed your minds. I'm not going to deny my friend. I needed advice at that minute. I really needed somebody from the High Commission, more than anything at any time in my life.
No one came. After 2 days, the Americans moved the men to a new location.
About 2 o'clock in the morning, I was hooded, handcuffed, hands and legs, and taken to this house, put in a room. Thank God there was air conditioning. Mat on the floor, windows and doors are boarded. We were stripped and full shackle, hands and legs.
The interrogations became worse.
The Americans would say, well, we can do just as bad as Saddam's people. I said, like what? He said, well, we can get the Africans to rape you and beat you up and anything like that.
Jamil al-Banna lost control and lashed out. He was beaten up.
They hospitalized him. I again asked if I could see my High Commissioner and a lawyer. And this is when they said, well, who do you think ordered your arrest? It was the British authorities that ordered the arrest. I was dumbfounded. And he said, look, I mean, we have all these details. Who do you think we got the details from? I mean, it's obviously the British authorities had wanted you to be in this situation.
The whole thing resonates with international complicity and agreement. It's completely synchronized. In fact, they're delayed here on a completely bogus excuse. And then, when they arrive, the Americans ready and waiting.
After 27 days, Wahab was freed. His business gone, shattered and confused, he flew back to Britain.
Nobody had come to me and says, well, you have done this and you deserve that in return. There isn't that. There is nothing. We haven't received anything from the consulate or the High Commission. Not one single assistance.
In a statement to this programme, the British government denied that they had requested the detention of the men. They said the British High Commissioner to the Gambia had personally asked for Wahab's release. But the Foreign Office refuses to help Bishar al-Rawi or Jamil al-Banna because they're only British residents, not citizens. The Americans secretly transported the 2 men out of the Gambia. They've been held in Guantanamo Bay for the last 2.5 years. Bishar told his lawyer British intelligence agents have visited them there.
The situation now of international illegality and willingness to kidnap, abduct, hurl around the world, deliver to torturers, has now become almost the norm. It's like the Wild West. There are no rules. There is no voice saying no. It's terrifying free fall.
What happened to Bishar al-Rawi and Jamil al-Banna is known as rendition, kidnapping suspects and putting them in American prisons. But there's an even more worrying system, extraordinary rendition, where suspected terrorists are abducted and sent abroad to be tortured. It's American, but it drags in nations across the world. This programme set out on a journey round some of the stops in America's network of torture. We started in Ottawa, Canada. Maya Arar is a Canadian citizen, born in Syria. He's a successful software engineer who's lived in Canada since his teens. He's married with 2 children.
I was sometimes branded as workaholic by my wife because I used to work a lot, sometimes 9 to 9.
In 2002, Maya was on a family holiday in Tunisia. But true to form, important work prompted him to return home early.
I was transiting through New York, JFK Airport, on my way to Montreal. And the plane arrived on time, everything was normal. But they pulled me aside, they told me to wait. They told me this is routine. So I was not worried much up until some FBI and New York police showed up. That's when I was really thinking, what's going on here? This is serious. The questioning started, normal, like asking me, where do you work? How long you've been in the States and things like that. And then it moved to something more serious. And what was striking is that they had a report that thick in their hands that they were consulting from time to time. So my reaction was to say, I need to make a phone call to my family, and they ignored me. And then I said I need a lawyer. They said you are not an American citizen, so you're not entitled to a lawyer.
Did they tell you at any point what you're supposed to have done?
No, nothing.
It turned out that Maya knew someone who, unknown to him, was on a terrorist watch list. That, it seemed, was all the Americans needed.
I was so disoriented. I was I didn't know what was going on. I thought it was a mistaken identity or I really didn't know what was going on. That interrogation lasted for about 3 to 4 hours. 5 minutes later, they came and shackled and chained me.
Shackles on your arms, chains on your ankles.
It's exactly like you see those Guantanamo detainees. Same thing.
Maya was questioned at the airport for nearly 36 hours. Then he was moved to a local prison.
I didn't know where he was. He disappeared. He simply disappeared.
His captors pressured him to admit he was linked to Al-Qaeda. When he refused, they made a far more frightening threat.
He said, we want you to go back to Syria, or we want you to go to Syria voluntarily. I said, what? I said, why? He said to me, you are special interest. I said, you're gonna send me to Syria, to a country where torture is commonplace. I said, no way, I'm not going to Syria. I'm not gonna go back to Syria.
2 weeks after being held at JFK, Maya was woken in the night and taken to a waiting Gulfstream jet.
I knew by then they were sending me to be tortured. I started crying and I said, how come you're doing this? They actually flew to Washington first. They changed the whole team. So I overheard them talking on the phone many times. They're called the Special Removal Unit.
The Special Removal Unit.
Special Removal Unit. Whether they belong to CIA or FBI or immigration, I really don't know.
Maya's family had no idea he'd left US soil. He'd simply disappeared.
That went for like 12 days without knowing where he was. Canada was saying maybe he is in Syria. Syria was not answering. Jordan said we don't have him. The US were saying you won't find him in the US. I was desperate, but I was also very angry. I was saying, how you cannot find a person? You know, tell me. And I was thinking seriously that maybe he was killed.
While his family searched for him, Meir was already in the hands of Syrian military intelligence.
They took me upstairs, they put me in the chair, just standard chair. And they told me to stand up. And he told me, open your right hand. I opened it, and he hit me very strongly with a cable, the black cable. That was very painful. I started jumping, and it's unbelievable pain. And then he told me sometime later, open your left hand, and he hit me again. And that one missed my palm, and it hit my wrist. And then he started asking again. He said, if you don't tell me the truth, I'm gonna beat you again. So I would answer his questions again, and then sometime later he would beat me again.
How much did they beat you? How many times did they beat you in one of these
The
sessions?
worst day was the third day, which lasted, I think, 15 to 20 hours. It's so painful to the point where you say to yourself, how can I stop this? What do they want? I'm gonna tell them everything they want.
You tell them anything they wanted to hear.
Anything,
Whether
anything,
it was true or not.
anything.
To stop the pain, he told them he was a member of Al-Qaeda. He was taken to an underground cell.
You call it a grave.
I call it a grave because it's the same size of a grave. It had no light. The only thing it had is in the middle, in the ceiling, is an opening with metal bars. And that's where I stayed for 10 months and 10 days. I can't still, up till this day, I can't believe. I think it's a miracle. I can't believe I stayed in that place for that long. I really can't believe it.
A year after the American Special Removal Unit first delivered Meir to his torturers, it was the Syrians who released him, clearing him of any terrorist links. He's now suing the US government.
I need at least partial answers for what happened to me. I need those people who did this to me to be brought to justice. This will give me some kind of comfort. I don't think I'll be able to go back to where I was before I was in prison, but at least getting the answers will help me heal.
In public, the US strongly condemns Syria for its use of torture, yet that is where they took him. Professor Theo van Boven was the UN Special Rapporteur on torture until last year. He believes the only explanation is that the US intended Meir to be tortured.
We were very concerned about the treatment he had been receiving there, that he was beaten with sticks and cables across his feet, other parts of his body. We addressed a letter to the United States, a more detailed one, and asked the United States to respond. We have not yet received an answer.
The UN rapporteur calls torturers to account. Professor van Boven believes that torture, albeit outsourced, is now routine in America's war on terror.
What we know is only the tip of an iceberg. Many of them, I have no statistics because these things happen secretly, but I would say it happens in hundreds has been happening in hundreds of cases. But it has become now more of a systematic practice.
Meir Arar's disclosure that a Gulf Stream jet took him to Syria led us to the next stage in our journey. Another Western country. Another eventful night for America's Special Removal Unit. In December 2001, an American-registered Gulfstream jet, tail number N379P, landed at a small Swedish airport.
We have rules in Sweden, and that means every plane who's coming are going to give the information to the police department, and especially to me, who is the represented the police department here on the Bromma airport. But I didn't see the plane at all. And actually, I didn't even know that the plane was here.
Meanwhile, Swedish security police had seized 2 men from the streets of Stockholm. One was Mohammed Al-Zari, the other Dr. Ahmed Agiza. They were Egyptians, asylum seekers who claimed they'd be persecuted at home. While being arrested, Dr. Agiza managed a brief call to his wife.
And then I have a telephone call. So I said to him, where are you? So he said, there is some person who arrested me, and they said that my application is refused. And they must keep me until I have new application. So he didn't. So when I said to him, what can I do? And I want to have any, but the line is cut.
The Swedes said they had secret evidence that the 2 men were associates of terrorists. They were taken to Bromma Airport. The American Special Removal Unit was waiting.
The Americans, they're running the whole situation here. There were some bags over the head. They wanted to show, they did not want to show the faces. Everything was going very fast and smoothly, and they were professional. No doubt about that.
The American agents took the men to a room, cut the clothes off their bodies, and drugged them. There was no chance to appeal or even speak.
He was handcuffed and shackled by his feet. He was forced to wear diapers, and they put an overall over him. He was blindfolded, and after this they put a hood over his head. And these agents, they did not speak, so they communicated by making signs.
Then the 2 men were hustled onto the waiting Gulfstream jet. Less than 8 hours after being snatched, Agiza and Al-Zari were on their way to Egypt's State Security Intelligence Service. Egypt is one of America's most important allies in the war on terror. It's also well known for human rights abuses and torture. We flew to Cairo to look for the 2 men, beginning at the Nadim Center, where Dr. Susan Fayed claims the US is using Egypt as a place to torture people by remote control.
The human rights situation, actually, they are not concerned with at all. They know very well that torture is taking place in every part in Egypt, and the only favor they could do, just to forget us.
This is the only torture rehabilitation center in Egypt. They see people all the time from the prison where Dr. Agiza and Al-Zari were taken.
We see fracture of bones in very serious places, like head. We see contusions and burns by metal objects. Scars of electricity is not a problem. The problem is the weakness and the paralysis of the limbs after that.
Dr. Agiza's mother came to meet us secretly in Cairo. She saw her son soon after the Americans delivered him to his Egyptian interrogators. She brought the clothes cut off from his body the night he was taken.
They cut them all up. His shirt, his belt, here it is, and his undershirt.
Her son told her that as soon as the Americans left, the torture began.
He would have been sitting on a chair with a guy behind holding him. And he asserted, of course. If he answered a question saying he did not know, this guy behind would push him, and he would be electrocuted.
Dr. Ahmed Agiza was sentenced to 25 years hard labour for belonging to a banned organisation. Mohammed Al-Zari is also believed to have been tortured. He endured 2 years of imprisonment before being cleared of all charges. He now lives under house arrest in a village near Cairo. We wanted to ask him about his experiences, but he was too scared to talk. According to international law, what happened here is illegal. But the advantage is that it gives America a level of deniability.
You can't just say, well, it wasn't me who did it. I gave it to somebody else who in any case tortures every day of the week. Yes, if you gave it to somebody who tortures every day of the week, then you are at one remove a torturer as well. I think it's extraordinary to try to make a distinction between those two.
The US government is responsible for acts of evil.
The US government is responsible for acts of evil if it is ready to send people knowing that they will be treated badly, more than treated badly, that they will be tortured, and in some cases have been tortured to death.
The Special Removal Unit's private jet, the Gulfstream N379P, is US registered. We asked aviation expert Chris Yates to dig out the information, official and unofficial.
This is no ordinary private jet. This is a jet that seems to be operating on US government business and has been given some cause for concern amongst not just the spotting community, but of course the wider community because of the type of passengers that this aircraft has been carrying.
Official data shows this plane has landed and taken off many times from British airports and RAF bases.
This plane has been tracked literally all over the world by a band of, a fairly sizable band of plane spotters. We've seen this aircraft pre-positioning through UK airspace. We've seen it in Luton, we've seen it in Glasgow. It's really quite active in the UK. And also it uses some of the military and former military facilities in the UK, Brize Norton, for example, and Mildenhall.
What was it doing in Britain? We tried to ask its owner, a mysterious Boston-based company called Premier Executive Transport.
According to company records, the head office of this mysterious airline is here, a first-floor office above a bank in suburban Massachusetts, so we're going up to pay them a visit. Hi, are you from Premier Executive Transport Services?
No.
We're told this is their corporate address here.
Where are you from?
We're from Channel 4 Television in Britain.
In Britain?
Yeah. Do you know how we can get hold of them? Speak to somebody from the company.
This is a law firm, and they are clients of mine. I can confirm that.
for you, but I cannot discuss anything about my client's business because of attorney-client privilege.
We're here because they've been involved in the transportation of detainees on behalf of the US government.
I really can't make any comment.
Premier is a paper company. The home address of its president is a post office box in Arlington, Virginia, close to CIA headquarters.
It's become fairly standard practice over a good number of years now that if intelligence operations are being carried out in foreign countries, that as far as the air support for those intelligence operations is concerned, they are always operated by what effectively appears to be a commercial company. It gives the intelligence community the ability to deny that they're up to anything at all. It gives them the ability to move in and out of different countries without being noticed as they would be using, for example, a government jet, a military jet, let's say.
The CIA refused to confirm or deny that they own the jet known as N379P. Days after we visited Premier, the jet's ownership and number was changed. As our journey continued, things got even murkier. Mamdouh Habib was arrested in Pakistan, then flown by US agents to Egypt. After 6 months of torture, he was flown on by the same agents to Guantanamo Bay. One of the British prisoners now freed from Guantanamo, Tariq Dagoul, was in the next cell.
He told me basically his life story. He told me how he was tortured underground, and he would, a cigarette would be put out, or cigar would be put out on his, his body. He would be beaten. A dog would be put on him, stripped naked, be punched, used as a punching bag. And this, don't know how long that lasted for, but he would be electrocuted, and that's what he went through in Egypt.
Mamdouh Habib's torturers wanted him to admit he was a member of Al-Qaeda. According to Tariq, no method was closed to them.
He told me photos of his family were put in front of him in interrogation, and he was told his family's dead, and he literally believed it. Because when it would become time to write letters, and I would ask him, I said, why aren't you writing home? And he said, my family's dead. And he literally believed it, and he never wrote at all.
Mamdouh Habib's family is alive and still living in Australia. Last month he was released from Guantanamo and has returned to them. He's never been charged with any crime. The United States, understandably, is obsessed with preventing another 9/11. Some see torture as a quick way of getting the intelligence they need, but others question whether America is being misdirected. Jack Clunan was an FBI special agent in the Osama bin Laden unit. We met him at his home just outside New York. In 2001, his team, working in Afghanistan, made a big catch. An Al-Qaeda commander, Ibn Sheikh al-Libi. Jack Clunan ordered that al-Libi be read his rights and brought back to America.
He would have come to the United States, been put into our custody, pled guilty in court, and we would have gone through that process. And we would have been assured probably at the end of the day that the information we were getting was accurate.
But that didn't happen.
It didn't happen.
In Washington, there was a row over al-Libi's fate. The FBI fought the CIA. The FBI lost.
Describe how that happened. I mean, describe the actual scene where he was taken.
He was duct taped and flexi-cuffed, and he was put in a truck and sent on to a third country to be interviewed. I believe he went to Egypt.
Interviewed? Just interviewed?
Well, I mean that's the term that
That's the euphemism.
that's the term of art that was used. I suspect that he was probably interviewed very intensely.
At the UN, just before the Iraq invasion, the US Secretary of State Colin Powell gave America's case for war. Most of it turned out to be wrong. Jack Clunan says the part claiming a link between Saddam and Al-Qaeda came from al-Libi's interrogation in Egypt.
Al-Qaeda continues to have a deep interest in acquiring weapons of mass destruction. I can trace the story of a senior terrorist operative telling how Iraq provided training in these weapons to Al-Qaeda. Fortunately, this operative is now detained.
After the war, investigations showed there never was any link between Saddam and Al-Qaeda. Al-Libi, who's now in US custody, has recanted his confession, blaming torture.
It seems to be a pretty clear case of telling people what they want to hear.
Well, I think if you're under duress, you're likely to say things that maybe you wouldn't have said otherwise. You cannot engage in these type of tactics if you're not assured that you're going to get accurate information. It's a waste of time, frankly.
Yet Britain, like the US, regards information gained through torture as valuable. This private memo shows that MI6 uses the products of torture to brief government ministers, even though those products were condemned as useless.
I think the United Kingdom is in a position which is entirely immoral. We have failed to disassociate ourselves from torture. We continue to get the products of torture, and in doing so, we are tipping the wink to one of the most oppressive regimes in the world.
The next part of our journey was to Uzbekistan. The regime there tortures on a vast scale. Britain is accused of complicity in that torture. Our filming in Uzbekistan had to be undercover. It has one of the worst human rights records on Earth. Despite that, it's one of Britain's and America's major allies. It's strategically sandwiched between Russia and Afghanistan. Many Uzbeks are Muslim, and its dictator claims he's fighting Al-Qaeda. We're driving to Samarkand to meet secretly with a dissident who says the alleged Al-Qaeda presence here is an invention to win favour from the West. Talking to us was an act of great bravery. It can bring terrible retribution, as Professor Jamal Mesaidov knows only too well. He told us what happened when 3 years ago he invited the newly appointed British ambassador to dinner.
The ambassador came at 7 in the evening and stayed for 4 hours. The following morning, I got a call and was told that Husrov, my grandson, had been killed and dumped outside his mother's home.
Husrav was 18. The British ambassador was Craig Murray.
He was killed slowly and horribly. Both his knees and both his elbows had been smashed with a hammer. His hand had been dipped in boiling liquid until flesh was starting to peel away from bone. The Uzbek government produced an autopsy report which claimed he died of a drug overdose.
Another dissident was boiled alive. The pathologist who examined him said you could tell because his corpse had a distinct tide mark. Soon, Craig Murray was helping scores of people whose relatives had died under torture. One was Karima Ashanova. Her family still surrounds her. but one important member is missing. Her brother was arrested in 2003 for alleged involvement in a banned Islamic group. Nobody ever saw him again.
When I saw him, I screamed, "You've murdered him." There wasn't a part of his body that hadn't been tortured. They said, "We didn't torture him. He had a heart attack."
Time and again, Craig Murray found that victims had been tortured to say they were members of Al-Qaeda.
All of this was routine. It was happening all the time. It was absolutely horrific, and on a tremendous scale, affecting thousands of people a year.
Craig Murray discovered that information from prisoners which he knew to be false, in cases which he had personally investigated, was being sent to the CIA and MI6. The ambassador warned MI6 its briefs were based on false confessions from the regime's gulags.
I was informed directly by a representative of MI6 that this material was regarded as high-grade intelligence, which contributed importantly to their general picture of a worldwide terrorist threat.
This stuff that in several cases you directly knew to be wrong, their own ambassador, you knew it to be wrong, and they were calling it high-grade intelligence.
Exactly. I was saying to them, look, I know that this stuff is just factually incorrect.
But worse, by taking data obtained under torture, the British were implicitly encouraging more torture.
I think torture would happen anyway in Uzbekistan, but undoubtedly the specific material being extorted from these unfortunate people was designed for a UK and US audience. So there was, I think, some extra torture going on for our benefit.
So you're clear, some of these people wouldn't have been tortured or wouldn't have been tortured so much had it not been for the fact that the US and Britain were using that information.
Yes, I think the need to provide intelligence material to the US and UK caused extra torture in Uzbekistan.
In 2003, Craig Murray returned to London to protest in person to his Foreign Office superiors.
I told them that I thought this was wrong. Legally, we were contravening the UN Convention Against Torture. It was obviously morally wrong, and it's practically wrong because we were obtaining duff material disguised as intelligence information. I was told that Whitehall didn't share my view and basically asked to shut up about it.
In fact, and unknown to Craig Murray, the Foreign Office did seek legal advice as to whether MI6's conduct contravened the UN Convention. We've obtained this document, written by a government lawyer. He concluded it was legal to possess information gained by torture.
I was told that my concerns had been discussed directly with Jack Straw and that he wanted me to know, but he lost sleep over the issue.
But he eventually decided to carry on using it?
He decided to carry on using the information.
Even though it was worthless?
Absolutely. My reaction was that really I don't think the torture victims in Uzbekistan care too much about Jack Straw's sleep patterns.
In July last year, Craig Murray wrote a strong memo to his superiors.
We receive intelligence obtained under torture from the Uzbek security services via the US. We should stop. Tortured dupes are forced to sign up to confessions showing what the Uzbek government wants the US and UK to believe. They are fully aware our intelligence community laps up the results.
I said that we were selling our souls for dross, and that's what I feel. We, as a nation, have been tainted by the decision to revert to using torture material, and I also feel that we've got nothing at all of any use from it.
At the end of last year, Craig Murray was withdrawn as ambassador. The Foreign Office said his position was untenable.
The Foreign Office decided the way to solve the problem was to get rid of me, as opposed to stop the torture, I kind of expected a wave of public opinion to say that this is appalling, our government is doing terrible things, we must stop it, and perhaps a wave of parliamentary and media opinion. And that hasn't happened either, really. And I feel that the United Kingdom seems no longer to stand for the kind of values I thought it stood for.
We asked the Foreign Office to give us an interview on Britain's complicity in torture. They declined, but did give us a statement saying the British government is vehemently opposed to torture as a matter of fundamental principle. The Foreign Office has intensified its efforts to combat torture wherever and whenever it occurs. The British government, including the intelligence and security agencies, never uses torture for any purpose, including to obtain information, nor would we instigate others to commit torture for that or any other purpose. Just before we left Uzbekistan, we learned that the family of a man called Samandar Umarov wanted to talk to us. He died in prison on January the 2nd. His sister was told to reclaim his body.
Before he died, they forced him to identify people he'd never met before as Islamic terrorists. He'd been tortured horribly. I insisted on checking his body before burying him, but the police wouldn't let me. They said, "We'll imprison you, then we'll bury the body, and we won't release you until after the burial."
The authorities say he died of a heart attack. Material from his confession could already be on its way to MI6.
For more evidence on human rights abuses, visit channel4.com/torture to discuss, debate and take direct action. In tomorrow night's Torture Strand at 11:05, look into America's brutal prisons. Next tonight on 4, Laurence Olivier goes in search of evil. Gregory Peck is the Nazi doctor in hiding in the movie The Boys from Brazil.